Yeah, I think what we did see in Jordan, what historically happened in Jordan, because of the nature of the mandate, which wanted to govern Jordan on the cheap in a way, it didn't have a lot of funds. The British state didn't want to invest a lot of funds in governing Jordan. And then you had a kind of situation where Emir Abdullah, because of this, had to set up the Emirate of Transjordan through alliances and deals rather than through the coercive power of a state. I think to some degree there was a degree of coercion, which I don't want to underplay. You know, some tribes were strafed by aeroplanes. There were military actions, but I mean, by and large, there was more perhaps alliance making and deal making than in, say, certainly in the British mandate in Iraq, and to some extent the French mandate in Syria. Although they had their own system of kind of patronage and encompassment going on with the tribes there. But I think because of this in Jordan, in some ways, and because of the survival of the royal house, the system of tribal patronage politics, if you want to call it that, is much more continuous and much more accepted and blatant than it is in other states, which have had a kind of veneer of Arab socialist, Republican, Nasserist or Ba'athist ideology put on top of them. I think various scholars have looked at similar things in Syria, especially Dawn Chatti, where I think certainly the in the immediate post-independence period, Bedouin and tribes were considered almost a kind of developmental problem, something that needed to be developed, something that was backward and alarming. And I think this even, I'm not so much of an expert on Syria, but this continued into the early Ba'athist period. But then later on, Hafez al-Assad sought powerful political alliances with these tribes and made much more use of them politically. And I think similar things happened in Iraq, less so in Egypt, from my understanding. But in Jordan, you never really had so much of a developmental drive to prevent such things. It was never sort of driven underground and then re-emerged like it did in Syria. It was always, to a degree, accepted and to some degree even valorized as kind of part of the structure of the state. And I think, since, particularly after Black September, King Hussein really emphasized sort of Bedouinization of the military, as we've already sort of touched on this, but the Bedouin is a kind of symbol of the loyal original East Bank Jordanian. So I think that because of that, it in other places, patronage politics and even the politics of tribalism has been significant. In Jordan, it's taken on a particular kind of aesthetic, in a sense, because of its acceptance and celebration by the state. I think the other thing in Jordan that's slightly unusual is because of the kind of the way the royal house has operated. You've had you had one brief sort of experiment with Arab national socialism in sort of nationalism and socialism in 1956 under Salman Nabulsi's government. But since then, really, the government has been primarily concerned with the primary purpose of government is the sort of continuation of the royal house and the continuation of Jordan as an entity. So patronage in Jordan, my understanding would be, while you could talk about, in almost any political context globally, you could talk about the importance of patronage networks, kinship networks. Mm-hmm. This isn't even just in the Arab-speaking world or the Middle East. This is a sort of universal thing.
It's universal, of course.
Analyzing the state and the non-state. But in Jordan, it even come in Jordan, because of that what we were talking about, the way the royal house has in some ways come to encompass the state. Jordan's represented as a family, and the king is its father, and this sort of imagery is everywhere. And because of this, you have an idea of the kind of Jordan as a house and a set of lineages, and as a family. And you even, I think, it's important that since the 2000s, even beyond my area of sort of the Bedouin villages and tribal areas, even in East Amman, among Jordanians who are descended from people who came from Palestine,
Yeah,
you have family associations, right? And these are
of
often
course,
huge
of
of
course.
many thousands of people.
True.
But
They
it's
cluster.
still,
They cluster in East Amman and Zarga, like in the hive.
yeah,
And
precisely.
you have areas of Ashrafia where one clan, one tribe is concentrated, whether they are from Tafila, like those guys in
Precisely.
like those guys in Jabal Jofa and Jabal Taj. And of course, you have other families from the West Bank. There's nothing wrong with these things.
Yeah. But in Jordan, the crucial thing is, right, that the family association is a legal entity, which
True,
it can have a committee, it can have a common treasury, it can
true,
receive development funding from the state.
true.
And in some ways, it fills in for the state, and particularly in providing social welfare for its members, much like the tribe does. And because of this, it's not kind of tribes versus the state. It's government, the state power and government power trickles down through families and through family heads in Jordan in a way that is not unique, but is unusual in the way it's emphasized and valorized compared to other countries where other political systems rather, where this sort of thing happens, but it's not sort of made part of the state and it's not sort of celebrated in the same way.